I know Mark PUKITA wouldn't mind losing 2 minutes of his talk time here to talk about something as important as that. Mark PUKITA is a conservative Republican who is running for Senate. He's in that very crowded field, which became a little less crowded when Bernie Moreno decided to suspend his campaign. But he is in the Republican primary field for Senate. He joins us now on AM 1420. The Answer. Mark, good morning.
Bob, how are you? Thanks for having me back.
Yes, sir. It's good to have you back, especially, Mark, because I got a memo from one of your team that said Mark doesn't want to just come on and campaign. This isn't about his campaign for Senate. You wanted to come on today to do something that I also kind of started doing a couple of weeks ago when I talked to Jack Windsor about the ORP, about the corruption in the Ohio Republican Party that nobody seems to be interested in. As long as we carried the Ohio by 8 points for Trump, well, then the ORP is doing a great job. It's not, and they're not doing things on the up and up either, and I know that's extraordinarily important to you. So I'm going to give you some free rein here to tell me what you know.
Right. Well, first let me say thanks for having me on, but that first 2 minutes that you talked about that you said took away from my talk time, those are two very important minutes. The fact that we're murdering 3,000 Americans or more a day is just, it's abhorrent. And we need to fix that problem. And I've said I would support a heartbeat bill, at a minimum heartbeat bill at the federal level.
Amen.
And so I would encourage your listeners to consider making that donation, because we know what that does when a pregnant mom sees her child in the womb. And thanks for doing that. So the Ohio Republican Party, I am the only candidate in the Senate race who's willing to say that the Ohio Republican Party is corrupt from top to bottom and left to right. And we need a full regime change there. And we have been focusing on this as a way to show Ohioans how we will fight for them in Washington by doing it here in Ohio during the campaign, what we call leaving Ohio better than we found it. And the Ohio Republican Party has $2 to $3 million of money that they can't account for. They won't tell us where they spent it. I'm not suggesting it went in anybody's pocket, but I believe it went to candidates or state central committee members who were running for re-election that they wouldn't want us to know about. They haven't had an audit in 16 or 17 years. It's required annually by the bylaws of the Ohio Republican Party, and it needs to be done. And this morning, I finally reached the breaking point and said, I will pay for the audit personally, not from campaign funds, personally. I will pay for the audit to be done for all or most of the years from 2017 to 2022, because it needs to be done. Secondly, we have an event on Friday. The Ohio Republican Party State Central Committee, the governing body, the board of directors, if you will, for the Ohio Republican Party, meets on Friday. And we have rented a room in the same facility, and we are asking grassroots Republicans to show up in numbers to essentially protest the corruption in the Ohio Republican Party and try to keep them from endorsing Mike DeWine for a primary, because we're also fighting primary endorsement.
That's right.
So that meeting starts 8:30. I mean, we'll be there early. The meeting for the ORP starts at 10 o'clock. They have closed the meeting to members, like guests like us, because they don't want us to see how corruptly they operate. And they tell us it's going to be live streamed. So you will be able to watch the live stream in the room with us. It's a room that'll hold 100 people or so. You'll be able to watch the live stream if they make it happen. And we will have presentations afterwards from probably close to 20 candidates. And they'll be short presentations. We won't be there till midnight. But by 20 citizen candidates who are running for state central committee, who are running against these swamp rhino characters that just keep getting reelected over and over again because they endorse themselves, Bob, to get on slate cards. It's absolute corruption from top to bottom and left to right.
It is all of the above. We're talking to Mark PUKITA, who is a Senate candidate. He's a conservative through and through, no doubt about that. And Mark, I want to make sure I understand this. So you have rented a room in the same facility where the ORP will meet on Friday to consider their state central committee will meet to consider endorsements. And we all know already that they have never, ever, ever not endorsed a Republican incumbent for governor. And they're all starting to find ways to cheerlead for our own little Napoleon. And endorse him here, thus putting a ton of money in his pockets to make sure that he can hold off Jim Renacci or anybody else. So you rented a room in that facility there. Do you know, is it next door? Is there a shared wall by chance?
Well, we aren't sure because we did have that last time, but then you remember they canceled the meeting because of the snowstorm. And so we had to scramble, as I'm sure they did, to make sure they could we had to wait for them to set the date. So it was February 18th, this Friday. And then we had to go get a room. And it's not the same room we had before. So we may not be wall to wall with them.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is obvious because it would be, and I know that's why you've tried it, right? You want us to be heard. You want to fill that thing. What's the capacity in the room, did you say? 100?
I think they said 90 to 100.
90 to 100. You get 100 patriots in there who are trying to listen to what's going on in there and to be heard because, I thought that the Republican Party once stood for transparency. I'm sure I heard that somewhere before. I thought the Republican Party usually condemns the Democrats, which operate in the dark and operate in secrecy. They're not committed to transparency. And yet, here's the Ohio Republican Party led by Bob Paduchik and the rest of the State Central Committee saying no guests are allowed. No guests or only approved guests of committee members. Nobody else is allowed to come in. You have to apply. Even the press. They tried to block out Jack Windsor because his Ohio Press Network coverage was a little bit negative for Mike DeWine because they allowed an op-ed to go in reminding everybody of all of the things Mike DeWine said and did during his lockdown phase. And so they weren't going to allow Jack Windsor in, and he had to plea for a credential to show up there as a member of the press. So I don't know what the ORP is hiding, but this isn't how I remember Republican Party's supposed to act.
Yeah, they're hiding everything, Bob. They're hiding everything. I got into this race to primary Rob Portman because I didn't think he was doing a good job. And then when he dropped out and I saw how the ORP operates, I started to run on that to show people how I would fight corruption in D.C. And I'm the only U.S. Senate candidate doing that. I'm also the only U.S. Senate candidate that will say this. Mike DeWine does not deserve to be reelected. He deserves to be investigated.
I completely concur.
Yeah, and endorsing him will do great damage to the Republican Party. If the Ohio Republican Party State Central Committee endorses Mike DeWine on Friday, they have no idea how much damage that's going to do to the party. If they love the party like they say they do, they will not endorse anybody, including Mike DeWine, for the primary election.
Well, you know full well that is exactly what they're going to do, and I know that's why you're getting this room together and getting people out there to so that they can hear it and protest it and make their voices heard. And I want to go back, if I can, real briefly, Mark PUKITA, to to your offer. And I did see it on your Facebook page that you are personally willing to pay for an audit by a CPA firm, mutually acceptable to the ORP, to audit the books going all the way back to 2017 through today. What do you have to do to make that happen? Will the ORP even agree to talk about it with you in order to decide on a mutually acceptable firm, or are they just going to ignore you?
I'm sure they'll ignore me. But all they would have to do is begin a conversation, and we can build a list, and we can decide, and I can write a check. It's not that hard. None of this is hard. They want to make it hard.
Well, of course they do, because that would shine a light on. Look, I'm reading this brochure that I got, and I guess it's a brochure because this is one of the things that was sent to me that led to me to booking you for the program this morning, that you want the Ohio Republican Party to implement much-needed reform and admit to past and current failures, including rigging primaries, unauthorized money transfers, failure to pay taxes, purging committees, in bed with bribe schemes, pay-to-play culture, indicted leaders, financial irregularities, fake candidates, secret voting, crony appointments, and on it goes. That's why, of course, they're not going to want to actually talk to you about it, because they want to keep all of that stuff in the dark.
right? I don't even think it's arguable that we have the most corrupt state GOP organization in the country. That's not where we want to be number one. And it seems like Mike DeWine, who's the titular head of the Republican Party in Ohio, is okay with that.
Yeah.
He's okay with Ohio becoming District 12 on the Hunger Games. I mean, we've got an opioid crisis that he's done nothing about. We've got crumbling infrastructure that he's done nothing about. We have rural counties that have been neglected for decades that he has done nothing about. Broadband, 5G, overreach of FEMA floodplain insurance requirements so they can't develop their waterfront.
And that's to say nothing.
Republican base is angry.
That's to say nothing about the joblessness rate in this state compared to the national average before the pandemic, before COVID, before locking it down and killing businesses and taking jobs away. That's beforehand. So I completely agree with you. And they seem to think, no, what's the problem here? We have a 25-8 majority in the Ohio Senate, 61-38 in the House. We got Trump on Ohio 8 points. We're doing a great job here. They seem to think that's all it's about. Never mind the fact that super majority in the Ohio General Assembly does nothing that the people want them to do. That's exactly
right. And it's because Mike DeWine has them on short leashes.
Exactly.
I mean, think about this, Bob, and I know you know this. Ron DeSantis has a smaller supermajority in Florida than Mike DeWine does in Ohio. Florida gets things done. I mean, it's hard to keep track of what they're doing.
No. Mark,
and here we get nothing done, or if we get something done, it's so watered down it's meaningless.
Mark, I've got a jet here. I appreciate you coming on. What do people need to know if they want to show up on Friday in the room where they're next to where they're going to be having the ORP event?
They just need to show up. We've got ORP operatives. We're spamming our event.
Where is it? Tell people where to go and what time.
I'm sorry. It's at the Nationwide Convention Center in Lewis Center, Ohio. It's just north of Columbus on Route 23. They can go to my website, mark4ohio.com. That's mark4ohio.com and look for events.
That's what I wanted people to have, so they can be there. Mark 4 Ohio with the number 4. Mark 4 Ohio. Mark PUKITA, Senate candidate. Thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it. I don't know how all this is going to play out in the primary, but I appreciate what you're doing for the sake of Ohio residents. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks so much, Bob.
All right.